Going to call this meeting to order of the Board of Directors, Canal Recreation Park District for February 18th, 2021. And to start us off with the flag salute, I've asked our special presentation guest speaker, Mr. Sean Crosby, if he would be so kind as to lead us in the flag salute. So Sean, take it away.
Hand over heart, and shall we begin? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you very much. Roll call, please. Yes.
Director Huffman. Yes. Director Lang.
Here.
Director Holt. Here. Director Huffman.
Yes.
Thank you. And as our esteemed secretary makes her way out, just as a reminder, we have our little notes here to make sure your microphones are on. So when she can hear you in the back room.
Unless I tell him
notes.
some jokes, right?
Well, that's a possibility, yes. Okay, and next we have special presentation. Mr. Fiedler, you can introduce our guest, or Mr. Hare, or both, or is he just on his own here?
Yeah, I think Sean's just on his own, unless Tom's got some special.
He can handle it.
Oh, this is good, because I have one from before. I just replaced it.
Well, you guys ready to hear about the best department in CRPD? So we get this going. So
There we go. And if you would, just for the record, introduce yourself so we have that on.
all right. Well, I'm Sean Crosby, and I am the Fleet Technician 2 for our Fleet Department. And tonight we're going to be giving you a little insight as to what we do at the Fleet Department. So without further ado, Fleet Department. So who are we? We have 2 employees at the Fleet Department, myself and Edgar. And I'm the Fleet Technician 2 here. I've been with Canal Recreation and Park District for the past 15 years. I am a AC certified master technician in areas following for engine repair, automatic transmission, suspension, steering, brakes, engine electrical, I have Class A license, and many, many certifications in hybrid and diesel systems. We also have Edgar Hernandez, who is our assistant fleet technician. He has been with Canal Recreation and Park District for the past 9 years. He is our 2-stroke specialist and kind of the backbone of our department. He's a welder and fabricator. He's also an AC certified technician in brakes, electrical systems, and suspension and steering. He's also our certified forklift trainer. So what do we have? We have 44 vehicles ranging all the way from our larger dump trucks, as you see here in the pictures, to our mid-size like stake beds, to our crew trucks that you guys see all over town, and even smaller like, you know, the supervisor trucks and small SUVs that you guys see here up at Hillcrest. We have 24 trailers, including our mobile stage, which I'm sure many of you guys have seen at our events. Larger equipment trailers towing around our bigger stuff, mid-sized equipment trailers, and of course our crew trailers that you see here in the picture. We have 90 pieces of large equipment, including our construction tractors, our smaller, you know, on-turf tractors, mowers, golf carts that are at many of the parks, and various attachments for these units, including flails and like tillers that attach to these tractors. We have 175 smaller pieces of equipment that include like walk-behind mowers or sod cutters that you see here. Generators, blowers, and like 2-stroke stuff that, you know, you see on the crews all the time here. In total, we have 133 assets that me and Edgar are responsible for, and for their maintenance and for the operators to be knowing how to use them and for, you know, safety. So what do? We do maintenance and repairs on those units. We do emergency field repairs. We do safety trainings on those units. We transport that equipment for the crews. We report and work with regulatory agencies, and then we do training of the potential commercial drivers. So we're going to start off with the maintenance and repairs. So we use a asset training or asset management program called Fleetio. And that is what we use for tracking records and inspection, or having the drivers report inspections for the life of the unit. It's actually a pretty cool little thing. They can do it on the phone. So this slide is an example of kind of the workflow that we do. So it starts off with like the driver using their phone to do an inspection. So the inspection is pretty simple. It's little stuff like, you know, checking the oil, the structural integrity of the unit that they're going to use, just how it looks, tires, lights, stuff like that. At that point, if something was wrong, they would flag it. Then it goes to us, and we would issue a work order, and then we would perform our maintenance from that point forward. So what type of maintenance do? We do general preventative maintenance on the vehicles. Stuff like oil changes, replacement of like wearable parts, kind of general day-to-day stuff that you would see, like take your car to the dealer. We do vehicle diagnosis or diagnosis of issues that the unit would be having. So that is, sorry, I'm losing my place here. We basically kind of diagnose, say the unit's having a usability issue or oil leak or something like that. We would then diagnose the unit. Then we would perform the repair. So if something was broken on the unit, we would, of course, replace it. We do almost everything in-house. Very rare that we have to farm something out. So those big jobs of tearing down an engine. For little stuff is like, you know, replacing the brake pads on something. We also do vehicle outfitting for when the units are brand new. So like say we get a crew truck in for the just kind of generally putting it out, put stickers on, you know, build the tool racks for the crews, or like in this case, in this picture, we are outfitting a Ranger truck and installing the light bars. We also do emergency field repairs. So something breaks down out in the field, we actually go out and fix it. Somebody gets stuck in the mud, we winch them out. Somebody gets in a fight with a curb, we help them out on the side of the road. In addition to all that, we do safety trainings. If something's like brand new, I mean, we do mass safety trainings with all the crews and everybody who's going to be using the unit, how to use it safely, properly, and what gear they need to be wearing when they're using it. We do annual stuff on the more dangerous units, something like the aerial lift, a chipper, or a chainsaw. And that's operations and what gear they need to be wearing. And that's something we do annually. In addition to that, we do refreshers. Say like something hasn't been used in a long time, we're available and we make ourselves very available to go out and give somebody a refresher on how to use that properly. Just doing this little thing is really cut down on misuse, I don't want to say misuse, not knowing breakdowns and mistakes. So this is an example of our aerial lift, and we're doing an annual safety training on this one. And we have Edgar up there and training one of the Rangers. We also transport the equipment around for the crews. When they're doing refurbishments, you know, there's only so many people, especially during this time, there's only so many people on the truck. So we help out and move some of the bigger stuff around since we are Class A drivers also. We also help prepare for events. So stuff like touch a truck or on a trail, we get our generators ready and bring them all out to the site. So that way other departments can use them. And stuff like the stage. Every time the stage goes out, we perform a safety check on that thing to make sure it's tip-top shape for all the events. Couple examples of us moving equipment around and tying stuff down. So this is an implement like we'll go on a tractor I was pointing out earlier. We also work with regulatory agencies. We do this is stuff that gets done annually. So it's working with CARB for smogs and the California Air Resources Board for all of our diesel on-road and off-road stuff. And working with the CHP for all of our records for the commercial drivers. We also do the hazmat for 2 of our facilities here, and that's reporting to the county and keeping records on that stuff. Then last but not least, we do commercial driver training. So anybody who wants to become a driver here has to, of course, to go take a test at the DMV, and there's 3 tests to go with it. And we train everybody. So that is the pre-trip inspection. So when you're getting a license for commercial license, or for a commercial license, you have to walk around the vehicle for 30 minutes and point out everything at the DMV. And that's actually a pretty tedious process, but we train people how to do that. You have, of course, your on-road stuff. And then I'll show you in the next slide, you have your parking lot skills, where you have to do multiple maneuvers around with trailers or trucks in a parking lot with cones. So next time you're at Canal Creek South, you see people doing this stuff. That's what's going on there. And that's pretty much in a nutshell, kind of real quick, what we do in Fleet. Any questions?
Thank you, Sean. It was fascinating. I had no idea some of this. I think I'll start on this side of the room. We'll just go around. So Director Lang.
Thank you. And thank you, Sean, for that report. It's very informative and important. And I'm glad that Tom realized that something that we needed to know as board members. With all the equipment, specifically maybe the larger equipment, do the manufacturers provide training classes where maybe we just get a new piece of equipment, you go on site to their manufacturing facilities, or do they come here and train you?
To answer your question, that is no, they do not. So without getting too deep into this, a lot of manufacturers are tending to kind of keep a lot of software and stuff in-house. That's why you see all this right to repair stuff in the news a lot lately, to give more people, independent agencies, to able to repair stuff. So like John Deere is the big one that you always see out there. Most of the time what we do is when we are speccing something, we spec a service manual with it, and just through our general knowledge and experience, we're able to kind of figure stuff out. But the service manual kind of holds your hand through a lot of that stuff. But in terms of software side, a lot of that stuff is locked out nowadays.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes, Director Cressworth.
I didn't really know you existed. I guess I just thought that if we needed to have one of the, trucks or something get repaired or have an oil change, that we just took it to the oil change station.
No, we do all that.
Over to the repair station. So it's really nice to know that we have, and I guess with that many vehicles, it makes sense that we have somebody that knows how to repair them. So I think that's wonderful. Now, it said that you teach the drivers how to, go for their licenses. Do you have to be certified to do that?
No, I'm just experienced with it.
Okay, so
I'm
you're
not
just-
testing. So if I was a tester, then of course I have to be with the DMV. No, so I help prep them for the
I see.
DMV, just because we have had, I myself have gone through it, and we have had so many people over the years go through it. It's like you pick up tidbits of what they're looking for.
Okay,
over there.
yeah, I was just wondering. And I wanted to just say, when I saw that trailer that you were backing up, we have a small trailer
Mhm.
and my husband backs it up. And if he dies, then I think I'll sell it. That looks pretty hard to me. And he was glad when we got a car that had like a little screen so he could see. And it wasn't nearly as big as that trailer.
I'll let you know a little secret. The bigger the trailer, the easier it is to
Oh,
back up.
really?
The small ones are incredibly hard to back
I'm
up.
going to pass that on to him.
Mhm.
And, tell him that he's doing a great job. But I just
Okay.
got the word from an expert trailer backer-upper here.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm really glad that we had this presentation. Really kind of opened up my eyes to a whole new area in CRPD that I didn't know about. So again, just quickly, so what did you do before you did this? Were you a technician 1? And then-
I started here as just a contract worker many, many years ago. And before that, I worked at a Chevy dealership up in Sacramento. And I worked my way up to the Tech 2 position over time. But
So you, before you came here, you had a lot of experience with
Yes,
auto
yes,
repair.
I've learned a lot of experience and did a lot of schooling here though. It's like, and the nature of this job and industry is I am in school constantly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is as everything changes, there's a new model every year, so you have to keep up with it. And so I exhaust our education budget every year.
Mm.
Well, good job. It was
Mhm.
great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Holt, did you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very
Mhm.
much. Very informative.
Director Huffer.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for the presentation, but like so many of our departments here in the Park District, how you were able to accomplish so much with just two of you really kind of blows me away. I think it's pretty amazing.
We're busy and both young, so.
And you mentioned it already, but you know, the automotive and trucking manufacturers are making so many changes. You know, way back in the day, we used to be able to change our own oil and, you know, do a lot of maintenance ourselves. And now you can barely even open the hood without getting a mechanic involved. So I'm sure there must be a great deal of continuing education that goes into this.
Oh, yeah. The vehicle side's a lot easier. It's the equipment side that they're tending to lock people out of a little bit more.
Are you involved in any of the purchasing decisions, or at least recommendations when we're replacing vehicles?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I work with Tom and my supervisor with that.
He doesn't work with me. He tells me what to do. Yeah, to give Sean some more props from that end and from the other stuff, and like what the way Nellie put it too, that Sean and Edgar are so good and they're so important. And I think even Sean had this in his original thing, like like he's saying, he's the most important because he actually keeps us going. Because you think of the crew truck without a crew without a truck is not a crew. And we have what, one loaner or two loaners, you know, like,
Yeah.
hardly, we have like an extra one so we could work on it, but he keeps everything up and running, and he's one of the most important people or divisions in our whole organization because he keeps the guys going. And just even from the culture of the trucks don't break down, that they know they can rely on Sean, so they do their job more effectively, more efficiently, because they know that they're driving or using a good piece of equipment. And to Chuck's point about purchasing, I mean, yeah, I've got you'll see it, you know, it's the usual, the humongous spreadsheet, but Sean's the one who makes the decisions and our recommendations. And sometimes I grill him a little bit about it, like, why do you need that? He tells me why, but he looks into the future because the Air Resource Board says, we have to do this by 2023. So Sean's like, oh, we need to get rid of this now because it's going to cost us $50,000 to repair it, or $75,000 for a new one. So let's get a new one. Yeah, even though we'll get rid of it 2 years early, but it was worth the cost. No, Sean is extremely good at what he does, and probably the most important thing too is the patience he has with some of the guys. I would say with training them safely, and the amount of injuries he is probably we've avoided because his expert training is highly valuable. So he's an important cog to the parts division.
Good. And I know Tom likes to get his hands dirty on occasion and try out some of the equipment. And you get hazardous duty pay whenever you're working?
No, we get good pictures. Is what happens. But I wasn't gonna be mean and put them in here.
I was
So
waiting
figured
for
that-
some of them.
No, I figured that was low hanging fruit.
I've gotten some stuff before. So. But man, you helped me out with that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we're Glenn.
Oh,
It was
Director
his
Lane,
fault.
go
It was
ahead.
his fault.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but seeing the aerial lift and recalling when we first purchased the aerial lift and so forth,
mhm.
has it had any major maintenance issues, or has it been performing fairly
It's
well?
performing really, really well. The only issue we had with it was we had a bad PTO pump out of the factory. that reared its head when we were trying to hang lights for our drive-through Christmas event we were doing. But other than that, it's been perfect. The plus thing, so the main reason we got rid of the other one is because of the Air Resources Board, that it was mounted to a very old vehicle. And the main reason why we chose this one is because it's the availability of parts and serviceability. So that's something like when that lift, as good as me and Edgar are, we are not certified to work on cranes. And so that one, they have such a huge kind of backing nationwide for, so I can make a phone call and get somebody out like within the hour out there. So
Thank you.
that's the plus with that thing.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. It was an excellent presentation. Like I said, I had no idea that just the two of you handled the breadth of this organization, from the tallest of lifts to the smallest of garden tools, in essence, yard tools. The two sides, because I come from a fire department background, and we got the small equipment crew, and then you've got the fire apparatus crew, and then we got the fleet crew, and you got this crew, and you got a whole section of people that handle certain equipment. But to have someone that goes top to bottom, left to right with the two of you is just phenomenal. So I'm just very impressed with that, because I have trouble keeping track of 2 car repairs that I need to manage in my family and to manage this whole fleet. So obviously, you've got the resources available, but because we've seen a few of these purchases come along, very unique pieces of equipment, and to know that we have the capability to keep those serviced and functioning is very, very encouraging. So appreciate that. I know education is nonstop, as you mentioned. We got new equipment all the time, especially with all these different pieces. So appreciate that. I did have a question. Where is your shop located?
We are at Borchard Park.
Orchard Park. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we are at the Borchard Service Yard facility over there. We have a 3-bay shop, and I mean, we do a lot of work in the shop, but we also are set up to where we can do a lot of work off of our truck, and especially during this time, we do a lot of work outdoors.
Okay. All right. Very good. Again, thank you again for the presentation. I had a bunch of questions as you were going along, and I kept checking off. Nope, you answered that one. Nope, you answered that one. So I said, I'm good to go. So again, thank you very much for being here this evening and sharing your skills with the district. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Good job.
Okay, that brings us to item 4, items from the public. Mr. Segedy, do we have anyone from the public this evening? No. Okay, very good. All right, next is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve or any changes? Director Holt? Thank you. And Director Huffer?
I'll second.
Very good. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that moves forward. All right. Next, we have our consent calendar. We have item A, approval of minutes, item B, approval of warrants. Any discussion or a motion to approve? Director Cusworth?
It's not a big deal, but I went to that land use meeting. It wasn't in the minutes, and since we are having a presentation on that, I thought I would just mention it.
Okay, well,
Did you mention it last meeting?
I thought I did, but
Yeah.
maybe I didn't.
well,
I don't know.
we'll make sure that's corrected. Okay, and was there anything else for modifications? All right, do I have a motion to approve then with that modification? Director Lang?
Make a motion to approve consent calendar 6A and B with the amendment.
Okay, a second for that?
Second.
Director Holt? Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that moves forward. Okay, we have no deferred matters. And that brings us to item 8, items for discussion. We'll send that over to our General Manager, Mr. Friedel.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nichols and members of the board. He's there on the TV. So I was going to kind of do the setup of welcoming Michael Forbes, the Deputy Community Development Director for the City of Thousand Oaks. I want to just do a quick shout out and express some appreciation for him being here, because this month for him, I can't imagine anyone having a more busy month than Michael and the Community Development Department team that's working on the general plan update. So the city as this board knows, the city's been going through a general plan update process over the past, I don't know, 18 months, maybe 2 years even. And it's kind of culminated to this month, February, where the maps have been revealed, the community's starting to look at them, and Michael's been very gracious and agreed to come and do a presentation to our board that he is also doing out in the community as well. So I know he's super busy, and we promise not to keep you super long, Michael, but we appreciate it. Welcome you and let you do your thing.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for having me tonight. Don't mind being here at all. I'm happy to get out and talk to the community as much as possible and get the word out about this, because we want participation from as many people in the community as we can get. So I am the project manager for the general plan update, and there's a number of other staff that are working on it, as well as a consultant team that the city has hired to help us with the project. As Jim said, we're about 18 months into the update process now. And the general plan covers a lot of different topics, and is going to be a pretty big document, but really the centerpiece of it and the part that gets the most attention is the land use element and the land use map. And that's because that really dictates how the city is going to grow and develop in the future. So that's really what I'm going to focus on tonight. And that's what's out for public review right now, and what we're asking people to give us comments on now. So, oops, that's not the one I wanted to share. This is the one. Sorry about that. So rather than doing a separate PowerPoint, I'm actually, what you see on the screen tonight is actual pages out of what we're calling the briefing book, which is the document that we released that summarizes all the land use alternatives. So I'm just going to walk through some pages of it so that to kind of familiarize you with the document if you haven't had a chance to look at it already, so you'll know what you're getting into when you look at it. So this is the existing land use map from the current general plan. The land use map is a bunch of colors on a map, and you can see the legend down at the bottom. Each one of those colors represents a different type of land use and a different density associated with that. So low and high density residential, commercial, industrial, and of course open space. You can see that green is the biggest color on the map, which we like. So this is the existing map in the current plan. So what's a couple things that are driving this process and the reason that we need to look at making changes to this. One is that the state of California every 8 years gives every city an assignment of housing units that we have to show in our general plan we have adequate capacity to build. Doesn't mean we actually have to build them, doesn't mean they're going to be built, but we have to show them that over the next 8-year period, we can accommodate a certain number of new housing units if the market determines that they get built. When we look at our current map as it is now, we determined that we cannot meet the number that the state has given us with the current map that we have. We have a lot of capacity, residential capacity on this map, but most of it is in existing residential neighborhoods where we obviously don't want any new or more development to occur. So the process that we've gone through is looking at where do we want to move that residential capacity to, and what parts of the city would be appropriate for additional growth. The other thing, aside from just the state telling us that we have to, we've heard from the community through the outreach process that a lot of people who would like to live in Thousand Oaks cannot live in Thousand Oaks because they can't afford to live here, because they can't afford a single family home, and maybe they're looking for other types of housing that we don't have here. So part of this process too is trying to address some of those comments that we've heard. We've had employers tell us that a lot of their employees would like to live here and can't because there just isn't housing for them. So part of what we're trying to do through this process also is address some of those comments. So over the past 18 months of public outreach, kind of the first step that we took with our general plan advisory committee and with the public was saying, what parts of the city do you think should not change at all? They should be stable, you're happy with them as they are, no new development, versus those areas where we think there may be opportunities for something new, and specifically for additional housing. So this is the map that was a result of several months of input from the public, and an online survey that got over 400 responses showing where development should go and what kind of development should go there. So not surprisingly, The green and yellow that you can see kind of faded out on this map a bit. Not surprisingly, those are the residential neighborhoods and open space areas of the city where people said they don't want change. The purple areas, predominantly along the 101 freeway, these are mostly commercial industrial areas, are where people said that there would be opportunities for new development and new housing. As well as the numbers on here, the 1 through 7, those are community shopping centers around the city, some of which may be ready for redevelopment in the future or for the introduction of housing units. So part of course, you know, what this means for CRPD and the ramifications of this are that we're looking at putting housing in areas where under the original general plan and under your plans, housing was not envisioned to go there. So we're looking at shifting park demands into other parts of the city where that wasn't originally, you know, planned for. So we've already started meeting with your staff. We've had a number of meetings, and we'll have more, I'm sure, to kind of look at what this is going to mean, and how the approaches to park planning are, you know, or may need to change if this plan is adopted, to ensure that we're providing park space in the areas of the city where there's going to be new demand. So the 4 areas of change that were identified, A is Rancho Conejo area, B is the area around the Oaks and the Jams Marketplace, C is Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and then D is the Westlake, kind of the east end of the boulevard in the Westlake area. So what we've done for each of these areas, this is the map of the parts of the city that aren't going to change. So you can see still lots of yellow, still lots of green, predominantly leaving those areas with the same character that they have now. What we've done for the other parts of the city, the change areas, is come up with 3 different alternatives for how these areas might develop over the next 25 years and beyond. This plan, the what we call the horizon year, or where we're looking out to for this plan, is 2045, so about 25 years from now. But really, you know, this plan looks beyond that too. It could, you know, things anticipated under this plan may happen beyond that 25-year period. So that's something that a message that we're really trying to send out, because I know that there's, you know, a lot of change proposed here, and when people look at it, change is scary. And if you think the change is going to happen overnight, that makes it even more scary. So it's important to remember that this is looking out 25 years into the future, and the change is going to happen gradually over time. It's not going to be an overnight kind of thing. So I'll show a little bit closer up of each of these areas, but I'm just going to quickly click through the 3 alternatives here. So you can see the purple shades on this map represent mixed use areas, which is a mix of residential and commercial uses in the same area. So you can see that all 3 of the alternatives have a lot of purple, which indicates the introduction of residential into these traditionally commercial areas. One thing to note about the alternatives too is that because of Measure E and our inability to increase the residential capacity of the city, all 3 of these alternatives would result in the same residential capacity overall citywide. So it's not like a low growth and a high growth projection. They would all result in the same citywide capacity because of Measure E. On the flip side of that, there's also a state law in place now, the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, which says that we cannot decrease the residential capacity of the city. So this has really been an exercise, as I mentioned, in looking at the existing residential neighborhoods that have excess capacity that was never built, and reallocating that into these areas where we want to see potentially more housing. So in the briefing book, you'll also find each one of these colors on the map. You can see down here, all of them in the legend. So each one of those colors represents what we call a land use designation. And the briefing book takes you through each of those with a little description of what they are. For the residential ones, how many dwelling units per acre that would represent, as well as a maximum height. The maximum height that number may or may not actually be in the final plan, but it's just intended to give an idea of the size of development that's anticipated for these areas. So these are the residential designations, not unlike what's in the city now, until we get up to this proposed neighborhood high category. This does have a density over 30 units an acre and up to 5 stories tall, which is obviously more than any of our current residential categories. And some of this, I'll point out, this is a good point to point out that, this is not necessarily what staff is recommending. These are ideas that we've heard from the public that some people are interested in, some people are not interested in. So some of these are concepts that we're putting in here to kind of float out and see what the public reaction is to them. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to end up in the final version of the plan, doesn't mean that staff is advocating for it. These are ideas that we're putting out there to see what the public thinks of them based on the input that we got previously. So these are the mixed use designations that I was talking about, which also have a residential density assigned to them because they can accommodate residential units. So these are some examples of what you might see. This is actually a picture of the 299 Thousand Oaks Boulevard project that was approved by the city council and is under construction now. So that's the type of project that's envisioned in the mixed use categories. And then we also are proposing, again, a concept to see what the reaction is to it, a mixed use high category that would allow a height of up to 68 feet and up to 60 dwelling units an acre. Obviously a tall building, taller than a lot of what's in Thousand Oaks now. But we've been pointing out that there are actually buildings in Thousand Oaks now that are taller than this. There's buildings that are up to 75 feet tall in some places. So it's not something that is not currently allowed. It is allowed in some places, but whether we want to continue allowing it in more places is a question for the public and what we're hoping we get feedback on through this process. And then different commercial categories, industrial categories, I'll just go through these quickly, institutional, parks, golf courses, and open space. As you probably know, there is the Parks Initiative, which says that anything that is currently designated on the map as parks, golf courses, and open space cannot be changed. It has to stay green. So we have, of course, followed that in this. It's already been pointed out to us that there were a couple of parks on the map that we think we missed that are supposed to be green, that through our error, they are not green. So we will be sure and go back and fix that before we bring the final proposed plan forward. So for each of these, of the geographic sub areas, the briefing book has the different alternatives and then little pictures indicating what type of development could potentially occur in these areas. This doesn't mean that every property in the area is going to look like this. These are just examples of what could potentially be built for those properties that redevelop. Doesn't mean every property is going to redevelop or that every property owner is going to be interested in doing this, but this would provide the opportunity for them to do that if they wanted. So you can see in Rancho Conejo, for example, looking at bringing in opportunities for residential projects and mixed use projects, gathering spaces, and this is really in the interest of supporting the businesses and employees that are in that area. That was one of the comments that we heard, was that people who work in that area would like to be able to live nearby, have amenities nearby that they can visit during the day. So that's really what this is focusing on. And then in the area around the malls, we heard a lot of comments from the public that the Jans and Oaks in particular would be good opportunities for potentially adding residential units, not necessarily tearing down everything that's there, but perhaps reusing some of what's there or adding to what's there. Part of what we've found, and it's not a surprise, but what we found through this process is that Thousand Oaks has too much commercial space. We are oversubscribed for retail space, given the ongoing changes in the retail market, the shift to online shopping, people's desire to have more of a dining entertainment type of experience when they go out instead of just retail. So part of this too is trying to provide opportunities for the commercial property owners to make a more economically viable use of their properties by allowing them to add residential space and not have all the commercial space that they may, as time goes on, they're going to have increasing difficulty renting it out and making viable use of it. So this would provide other opportunities for that. Then moving down to the downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, There is, as you may know, there's already the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan in place in this area that does allow for mixed use development. But the way that the capacity was done under Measure E, there's a limited number of projects that can go into that area. So this would envision bringing more of that type of development along the boulevard. And we've gotten mixed feedback on that. There's some people are very supportive of having housing along the boulevard, and others have said put it all is okay, but we don't want it along the boulevard. So again, hoping that we get a lot of feedback on that so we can see what the community's desire is for that. Looking at all three of those alternatives, some of the alternatives to envision, as you can see, like with the number 3 here, just keeping the commercial that's there for some areas of the boulevard, not for all of it, but in some areas, just keeping them as commercial properties. And then finally going down to Westlake in the East End area, a couple different options for this area, looking at the potential for example, for the Baxter property. This option envisions that property changing to a mixed use site, which would allow residential to go onto that site. As well as looking at possibly residential on the south side of the freeway. Alternative number 2 keeps everything north of the freeway commercial, but envisions allowing more of a mixed use environment along Townsgate, where this is all industrial and commercial in here. So some people have suggested that area might be a good opportunity to create a new residential neighborhood in that area. And then finally, this is alternative 3 is really more of a jobs focused alternative, particularly for this area. So it envisions keeping the Townsgate area all as industrial and all commercial on across the boulevard, Westlake Boulevard, and then keeping predominantly industrial for the Baxter site and the area to the east of that. And finally, the village centers. So this looks at the 7 different neighborhood centers around the city. And the 3 alternatives are basically, one is to keep them as commercial as they are now and not allow any residential. One alternative is to convert them all to a mixed use type of designation that would allow for residential units to be introduced into those sites. And then the third alternative is a mix of that. So allowing some locations would be allowed to have residential and some would not. So that's the briefing book. I'm gonna real quick go over to our website because I want to show you what's available there. So this is where we're asking people to come look through the briefing book and submit their comments. So there's several different ways that you can get comments to us. First of all, this is what's in this window is the actual briefing book itself. There's a download button here. So if you want to download it as a PDF, you can do that. Or if you want to view it in this window, you have the ability to do that too. You can actually, the way that this is set up, you can actually put your comments directly onto the book. So you can see there's these little bubbles every once in a while. If I click on one of those, no, 1,000 times no. See, we get comments from comments from all perspectives. Every one of these little bubbles is a comment that people have put. So you can actually see what other people are saying as you go through this. And then you can also, when a comment comes up, you can either reply to it, you can give it a thumbs up if you agree with it, or a thumbs down if you don't agree with it, or you can reply to it and add your own comments on top of what's there. So you can do that throughout the text, and then you can also do it, I'm gonna skip through here really quickly. Toward the end of the book, when you get to the maps that I was just showing you, those maps are in here. So you can actually put your comments directly onto the map. So you can say, sorry, don't get dizzy. I'm scrolling really fast here, trying to find the maps. Here we go. So you can come to the maps and actually say, I like this at this location. I don't like this at that location, and put the comments directly on there, which you can see some people are doing. These maps are not the easiest to navigate, and sometimes it's difficult to tell what the colors are. So we also have another option for a map. If you click on the little globe here, it will open up another map that's a little bit easier to I don't know if you can you see the additional map I opened up? Because it's a pop-up, so I'm not sure if you're able to see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. So this will pop up another map that you can, the controls are a little bit better. You can zoom in. It has all the streets on it. You can actually search for an address if there's a particular location you're interested in. And then when you click on the little eye here, it gives you instructions on how to use it. And then if you click on that looks like stack sheets of paper, it's the layer list where you can come in here and turn on alternative 1, alternative 2, or alternative 3, and you can turn those on and off and immediately see what the difference is between the proposed alternatives. Also, when you click on any one of these, it'll pop up a little window and tell you what the proposed land use designation is. So this is alternative 2. It's proposed mixed use medium, and that property size is 10.07 acres. We've had people inquire about the property sizes, so we added those on here too. You can actually comment directly on this map too. Seems like not many people are doing that, but if you click on, there's another icon here that looks like a little light bulb. You can actually, it gives you the ability to put your comment directly onto this map. You just click to add a point, and then it'll pop up a window to type your comment in. So you can also comment here. So whichever map is easier for you. And then the final step that we would like people to complete. This is all great if you want to comment here. We would love to see it, but what we would really like people to do is answer the survey. So if you click on up here, there's a link that says access our survey. So after you've had a chance to review all of this, if you click on this link, it will take you to, oh, you have already taken this survey. Okay, it's not even going to let me show it. So that takes you to our SurveyMonkey survey, which there's quite a few questions. If you really want to sit down and go through it and answer all the questions, you need to set aside a chunk of time, like probably an hour. And unfortunately, the way that SurveyMonkey is set up, you can't do part of it and then come back later. You have to finish the whole thing in one sitting. But there's a lot of questions in there about each of these areas. What do you like? What you don't like? There's multiple choice where you can choose what you like, and then there's also open-ended questions where you can just type in your comments. So really hoping that we get people to that. We have a couple hundred, over 200 people have answered it so far, but we'd really like to get more people so we hear from a broader perspective of views. So I'd encourage everybody to go to our website and check that out. It's toaks2045.org is our project website. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you need me to go back to any of the maps and pop anything back up, I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that. Very detailed. I know our General Manager, Jim Friedel, sent us all an email with the information on that and be able to take the survey, which I did take the survey.
Great.
I don't know if it was last night or the night before. And you're right, you do need to set a chunk of time aside to get that complete. But it was well worthwhile. And I had no idea that some of those other tools were available. I guess I could spend a whole week looking at that and maybe go through everything. But it's nice to have those various options for people. Questions for Ms. Rose? Yeah, so start with Director Huffer.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Really do appreciate that. I had a chance to briefly go through the briefing book, which is sort of a oxymoron, I guess, but there's a lot of stuff there. I did not find those detailed maps. That spent some more time with those. Early on in your presentation, you mentioned the Parks Initiative, and I was hoping it was just a misstatement on your part when you talked about shifting parklands.
No, if I said that, I did not mean to say that. No.
Okay.
Yeah, the Parks Initiative, anything that is currently designated parks or open space in the current general plan must stay that way. So that we are absolutely adhering to that and in what's proposed. I think what I did mention is that there were a couple of mistakes that we know we accidentally left parks off and colored them something different, but that will be corrected.
Okay. And then again, I didn't have take the opportunity to look at any of the detailed maps and zoom in on them, but the one that you showed us briefly, and I think it was the Rancho Caneo area, there seemed to be almost at a parcel level of detail as to whether it was mixed use, low density, medium density, high density residential. You seem to have all of those different categories color coded and specified, but I didn't see anything in that that indicates where additional park or open space might go. And my concern is, depending on whether you're looking at alternative 1, 2, or 3, if you have the high density residential in Rancho Pineo, where are we going to serve those high density residential residents with additional park space?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really good point. Unfortunately, the way that the law is, we cannot, because we're a built-out city. If we were still talking about, going into open space areas, it might be a different story. But of course, we are not talking about going into open space. So because we're a built-out city, and because all of the properties here are, if it's not a park, it's a privately owned property. When you're looking at where existing buildings are, we cannot show on the map where we might like new parks to go and designate those properties as open space, because we would be basically taking that person's property and saying that they can't make any use of that property. So we can obviously work with the city, and the Parks District can work together to look at areas where, it would be nice to have a park, or identify properties from a planning perspective where maybe in the future we want to look at buying this property for a park. But as far as actually putting the green on the map and saying a park is going to go here in the future, we can't do that, because the property owner would then have a claim against the city saying that you're taking away my property value because you're telling me that I can't build anything on it anymore. So having said that, part of the discussion that we've been having with your staff is looking at opportunities for that when projects are built, looking at if there's opportunities to require them to dedicate land, or do something other than, right now they pay the parks impact fees, which you use to expand or buy new parks. But looking at maybe other opportunities to require dedication of land or something like that when projects are built. So those kinds of new out of the box, if you will, kind of thinking is things that we're exploring with your staff to see if we can look at doing something like that in the future.
Okay, good. I guess my concern is that, and I know you're talking with our staff on this, but again, using Rancho Pineo as an example, if you designate, if the decision is made, whichever the alternatives it is, that this is going to be a high density residential area, whatever park space we might try to put in, we would have to buy the land. And if now the city's saying, well, this is high density residential, not being a real estate expert, but I would guess that would, the land prices would skyrocket if developers saw that this land is going to be used for something much more expensive, make it that much more difficult for the district to find any land the park could go into.
Yeah, that is a good point. And that hopefully, looking at other alternatives like requiring developers to dedicate land or something along those lines, maybe would then be so that the district wouldn't have to purchase all of the land outright. But yeah, you make a very good point.
Director Holt.
I'm curious, I've been following this, but the owners of the Jans Mall and also the Oaks, how do they feel about what you're proposing? And I ask that because, of course, with this COVID situation, sure, people are ordering things delivered at home, but I think people still like to shop. And you don't think so? You don't like to shop. Well, but I mean, they, and maybe some of these malls would make a comeback as far as retail stores go. But have they weighed in on changing their complexes and how they feel about this?
As far as I know, both of them intend to submit written comments to us as part of this process. So it will be interesting. I look forward to seeing what they have to say. We have met with both of them, the owners for both of those properties. And just generally, what they both have indicated that they're looking for is flexibility to use their properties in different ways, which may include the ability to put residential units there. And I think a lot of it is just because there's so much uncertainty in the commercial market right now. If you look at them all with the movie theaters and JCPenney and those types of businesses that are, we don't know how much longer those are going to be around, or if they continue to be around, what kind of form are they going to take? So I think with all of that uncertainty around those types of businesses, both of them are interested in having flexibility to allow them to potentially use their properties in different ways in the future.
But it isn't determined yet. I mean, they're not going, yay.
No, and I think I'll take this opportunity to make a point too, because people have asked this question. What the general plan does is it provides possibilities for people to use their properties in that way if they choose to. So we're not going any buildings or businesses that are there now. When the new general plan gets adopted, it's not like the city is going to say you have to tear down your building now and build housing because that's what the plan says. It's provides an option for them that if and when they want to redevelop their property in the future or make different use of their property, these are the options for how that could be done, which may include additional options than what they have under the current plan. But it's nothing that's going to be forced or compelled, or we've been asked if the city is going to start eminent domaining properties to require residential to be built, and the answer is absolutely not. We don't have the power of eminent domain in that way, and we wouldn't use it, I'm sure, if we did anyway. So the city won't be forcing anybody to do anything under this plan. It's all providing opportunities for development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cussworth.
My question was somewhat along the lines of Director Holton. You touched on that, but I went to the meeting and you have three very separate ideas on where different types of properties could go. But when push comes to shove, let's say somebody wants to sell their property and you've decided that it should be a certain way, but they have a developer that wants to do it something else. Couldn't the, let's say instead of a mixed use or residential, or I don't know, whatever, that they decide that they want to do something else than what you've chosen. Couldn't the city council just say, yeah, that looks good. We can rezone that. I'm thinking of like when the Conejo Valley High School was sold. At first it was supposed to be commercial, but then when the freeway wall wouldn't come down, they said, well, we can't have it be commercial, so we want to have it be residential and then have a hotel. And then the city said, yeah, we can rezone it for that. So, how strict are you going to be on which plan you take? Won't it all come down to whenever somebody wants to sell and whatever somebody wants to put on that land, and who's willing to put up the money, that the city council will make a determination at that time?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the city council, of course, is the ultimate decision-making authority when it comes to, well, everything really, but in particular, the general plan. So these maps that we're putting forth now are just what staff is proposing based on what we've heard from the public. And then we're going to be refining that into a preferred map, which we will take to city council. But ultimately, it's up to the five of them to decide if they like that map or don't, or they want to change it. And then similarly going forward in the future, the city council always has the power to change the general plan. There's limitations under state law as far as how many times a year you can do it and things like that. But basically, if the city council wants to change the general plan designation on a property, they have the ability to do that. But there's a number of caveats to that. One is that it's I don't know if I would say it's illegal, but it's very bad practice what we call spot zoning, which is if I have a neighborhood of commercial and I drop a single property of industrial in the middle of that or something like that, something that's radically different than everything that's around it. You generally don't do that. So it would have to be considered in the context. If you're going to change any one property, it would have to be considered in the context of the broader neighborhood and what's going on around it. And then the other factor is because of both Measure E and because of state law saying that we can neither increase or decrease the city's residential capacity. Any increase in one area needs to be offset by a decrease in another area and vice versa. So if there was a property that didn't allow residential on it at all under the plan, and the developer came in and said, I want to put residential here, give me some capacity to put residential. In order for the council to say yes to that, they would have to find another area to downzone to free up that capacity to give to the new property, because Measure E says that you can't give additional capacity to a property without taking it away from somewhere else. But having said all that, one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this plan, and as I mentioned before, flexibility is we're trying to give a lot of flexibility in the areas of the city where it's appropriate. So in a lot of these areas that we're calling mixed use, the property owner would have the flexibility if they wanted to keep the commercial that they have, or even build new commercial, or they want to build residential, or they want to build some combination of that they would have that flexibility. So that would be built in from the beginning when the plan is adopted, so that hopefully anything that property owner wanted to do down the line would be within the range of that flexibility that's already built into the plan. That's what we're hoping to accomplish.
Thank you.
And Director Lang.
Yes, Michael, early on in your presentation, you mentioned 2019, I don't remember the exact terminology, housing crisis or something.
Oh,
what was that?
Yeah, it's a piece of legislation. It's the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. It's also known as Senate Bill 330. There was several pieces of housing legislation that went through in 2018, 2019 that really changed the way that we have to do a lot of our planning and our housing planning under the general plan. And that was one of those pieces of legislation. And what it says, it has a number of factors in it, but the one that I was referring to is that legislation says that the city, in no city, not just us, any city cannot decrease its citywide residential capacity. So basically you can't downzone anything unless you do a corresponding upzoning somewhere else.
Okay, so that impacts the whole state of California, small cities like the Delano. I don't even know how big Delano is these days, but
it does. Yeah,
okay.
It applies to everybody.
Okay, now, as we all know, we've been working on Thousand Oaks Boulevard redevelopment plan for many years, the groups and so forth, trying to establish some future looks of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And then comes this 2019 housing crisis dictation by the state. Was the city of Thousand Oaks already contemplating the revising our general plan, or did that precipitate some of the things that we're now experiencing in the last year or so?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but the Housing Crisis Act is not what drove us to update our general plan, if that's what you're asking. I think absent that Housing Crisis Act, I think the conversations we're having now about the map would be different, because I think that there's a desire by some in the community to decrease the residential capacity of the city below what Measure E anticipates. So I think were it not for the Housing Crisis Act, we would probably be having those conversations now about whether it makes sense to, the excess residential capacity that we're taking out of residential neighborhoods and putting somewhere else, we would take it away and get rid of it. That would probably be an option that we would be discussing were it not for that legislation.
Okay, you did basically interpret my question correctly, and thanks for doing that. So, but I'm just wondering how many other cities that you're aware of and those involved in planning are right now going through the same exercise.
Everybody is going through, in Southern California, is going through the exercise, at least of the housing portion of it. So under state law, the one piece of the general plan, all the different subjects that it covers, the state calls elements. They're really chapters, but they refer to them as elements. So the housing element of the general plan, that's the only piece of the plan that has to be approved by the state. And it's very highly regulated under state law because they want to see that we're providing our fair share of regional housing demand. So that document, it's on an 8-year cycle that rolls through different parts of the state. So for Southern California, all cities in the Southern California region right now are going through the exercise of preparing the housing element for the next housing cycle. That has to be approved and submitted to the state no later than February of 2022. The actual deadline is October of this year, but there's a grace period that gets us to February. So everything that we're doing now, and the reason that we're on such a regulated schedule right now of ending the survey, getting to Planning Commission, getting to Council in April, is because we're all ramping up to having to submit this to the state for its review. So every city in Southern California is going through that exercise right now of trying to prove, that they have the adequate housing capacity to make the state happy. Different cities are dealing with it in different ways because every city is different. One of the disadvantages, I guess you could say, that we have is that because it's been so long since we've updated our general plan. I mean, the plan that we have now is still basically the same as the plan that was laid out in 1970, which has been a great plan, and it's managed the growth of the city very well. But because it's predominantly single family neighborhoods, we're a bit handicapped in that we don't have that additional capacity available to prove to the state that we can build that additional housing. So we're having to go through the exercise now of deciding, where do we want to put this housing, and we're putting it in places where it wasn't originally envisioned. Other cities that have updated their plan more frequently over the years, or have, evolved the plan over time, may have that capacity already available on the map. So all they have to do is submit their current map to the state and say, here you go, we meet the requirement. Not a lot of cities are able to do that now because the housing assignment numbers that everybody gets are significantly higher this year than they've ever been in the past. So a lot of cities are going through this struggle and having to deal with this, but in different ways depending on their situation. But we're definitely we're not alone in this.
Michael, you're doing a good job in providing a lot of additional information that I had wondering in my mind. One last question, being that there are so many different cities and so forth going through the same exercise to meet that 2022 deadline, is there some organization like California League of Cities, California Cities, or something trying to create some collaboration between all these different cities? We're not just doing it on our own and ignoring other cities and what they're doing, right?
Well, it's regional in the sense that we all get these numbers assigned to us, but it's very individual in that the state requires every city to meet these requirements on their own. And every city has to, so the number that we get is different than the number that Simi Valley gets and different than the number Camarillo gets. And our number is actually relatively low compared to what some other cities got, like Ventura's number is like double what ours is. So, but each city has to determine, based on its own values, its own vision, its own community character, how it wants to go about providing for those units. So cities definitely talk to each other. I mean, there's a Ventura County planners group that meets once a month where all the planners from the cities get together and share information and talk about what each other is doing and learn from each other. So there's definitely that, we're all aware of what everybody else is doing, but At the end of the day, each one of us has to submit each city has to submit its own separate housing element to the state for approval.
That's understandable. I'm glad to hear that there's that planners group, that there's some interaction and potential sharing of information that might benefit Thousand Oaks or Simi Valley or whatever. I think communication is very important when you're going through an exercise like this. And that's been one of my homework assignments this weekend is going through, going online and going through some material and taking the survey. But congratulations to all the work that you and your department are doing and the presenting it to our citizens. I think that's very important, getting them involved. So continued good luck. And I know you will be continuing to communicate with our general manager and Tom and so forth. So thanks again for your presentation.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. Most of mine have been asked already, but I have a couple of clarifications. Michael, could you restate, if you did, I don't know if you stated this right, how many units are still out there that through the Measure E process, they're kind of anticipated as a maximum amount that the city could possibly develop?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different numbers floating out there. So the maximum residential capacity of the city, and when we say maximum residential capacity, that assumes that every single parcel in the city gets developed to its absolute maximum density, which has never ever happened in the history of cities. But it's a number on paper that we have to deal with. So that number under Measure E is a little over 81,000 units total citywide. There are about 48,000 units already built in the city now. So that leaves a remaining total capacity of 33,000 units. So that's the 81,000 is the total number that we have to meet. We can't go over it because of Measure E. We can't go under it because of the state law. So there's basically 33,000 units that we're dealing with. But again, that number is on paper. One of the exercises that we have to do later this year, once we have the preferred land use alternative, we will start that exercise, is projecting the actual growth between now and 2045, because that's the information that we use when we do the environmental impact report to study what all the potential impacts are of this plan on traffic, on utilities, on air quality, water, all of that. We use a 2045 growth projection for that, and that will tell us realistically how many additional units and how many additional people we expect in the next 25 years. But we haven't gotten to the step yet of going through that exercise.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, in the current process, that those 33,000 units or thereabout would be only in the areas of change, which is predominantly along the 101 corridor or the Thousand Oaks Boulevard corridor, and a smattering of 7 villages around the city. So those are the only areas that could possibly accommodate these 33,000 units according to the proposed general plan. Is that correct?
Not the only areas, the majority of it, yes, but there are still some outside of the areas of change. There are still some multifamily neighborhoods that have additional, that could, some properties in those areas could redevelop to, they're predominantly lower density, so like townhomes, maybe some condominiums, things like that. So there is some of that available outside of the changes, the change areas. But I'll get super technical for a second. We can't, for the purposes of complying with what the state wants us to comply with, we cannot count those because those have already been counted. Last time around, we had to go through this process 8 years ago. And one of the pieces of state legislation that was passed says, if you already counted these properties 8 years ago and they still haven't developed, that means they're never going to develop and you can't count them again. Now, how they came to the conclusion that just because it hasn't been developed in the last 8 years means it's never going to develop, we all scratch our heads about. But that is what the state law says. So that additional capacity that is sitting there, we actually cannot count. We have to go find other new capacity to count.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I was just trying to get some clarification is Director Huffer was asking, I think Director Lang as well, when we know there's basically no vacant land available to expand the park system to. And you can't say, well, we're going to do that in some other part of town. There is no other part of town to do it. And so as these, residential units increase, wherever that happens to be, there is no land available to do it. It was also mentioned by Director Huffer is the price of the land on Teal Boulevard is going to be so extreme. It's not going to be very easy for the district to just go and start buying land up, even if we wanted to. So with that in mind, and I know you said the city is aware of this and working with staff, is there an underlying, awareness that there will have to be some cooperative effort as we move forward, that it's not just collecting Quimby fees, that there has to be some proactive effort to actually identifying through these processes where this land may be. And like you said, it's not a dot on a map or a polygon on a map. It's just, we know it has to be there somewhere. And so as those opportunities arise, is the city kind of that mentality that we know we need to make sure that we identify those when those opportunities arise?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's there. It's definitely, we view this as a partnership, and absolutely we'll continue working together to figure this out and find ways to provide the additional park space that's needed.
Because regardless of how many units there are, it's going to require land, and we can't enhance land. We can enhance the amenities on the parkland, but we can't enhance the land to increase it. So that would be a bit of a challenge for us.
Yeah.
By the way, just for your information, I know a number of the board members have attended some of the workshops and webinars and things online. So what you're telling us tonight, we appreciate the clarification, because some of it we're gathering from different venues, and appreciate kind of focusing on this. As just lastly, for my benefit, again, thank you for taking this on, but whether you volunteered or were told to do it, I don't know. It's a very challenging process. And I know, just as you mentioned, some of the comments that you get are not always favorable. And I'm sure you get phone calls along that same line. But just curious, how long have you been with the city, and how long in this position that you're in right now?
I've been with the city for about 1.5 years. I started in September of 2019, and this was handed to me on my first day. They warned me. They warned me. They said, "Here's what you're going to be working on if you decide to work here." So I've done this in other cities before, so this isn't my first time doing a general plan, but this is definitely the biggest city that I've done one in, and facing the biggest challenges as far as having to figure out where this housing is going to be built. So this is definitely the most challenging one, but it's interesting. It's, I'm a planner, so this kind of stuff is fun to me. And our, like our consultant says, the negative feedback that we receive, it's not bad. It's more information. We want to know what the community wants, so that we can do our best job at planning for what the community wants itself to be in the future. So the more perspectives and viewpoints that we hear, the more information that gives us to make our recommendations to the council. So it's a good process when we hope we hear as many voices as possible.
I appreciate that input. Got a couple final questions here for a couple of directors. So Director Holt and then Director Cussworth.
Hi. Yeah, it was a great presentation. My question, and I guess I haven't read enough about it, but we're talking 24 years from now is when all this is supposed to have been accomplished, correct? That's the time span. This is not everything has to be done overnight. Is that correct?
Correct. Nothing is going to happen overnight. The number that we get from the state for the housing units, that's an 8-year time frame, but it doesn't mean that all of those units are going to be built in 8 years. It just means we have to show on a map that there's the ability for it. And then our plan looks out the 24 years. And again, the colors on the map and what's being proposed through the alternatives, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen in that 24-year period either. It's the city's ultimate vision of where it wants to be, which is why it's good to revisit these plans every so often to make sure that we're still headed in the right direction. But yeah, to answer your question, absolutely not overnight. This is going to be, decades to implement what's being envisioned.
But do you have to have the plan ready? There could be a different political system in California in, I don't know when, but I mean, that's a long time, 24 years. And I mean, could anything like that be revised at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, the typical cycle for most cities is I mean, it's a big effort to revise these plans, so it's not something that you do all the time. But ideally, the state recommendation and what most cities try to do is revisit this every 10 to 15 years. So you're looking 25 years into the future, but it's a rolling 25 years. So every 10 to 15 years, you revisit looking 25 years into the future and say, okay, since we last updated this, what do we want to keep? Where, are we headed in the right direction? What do we need to change? What in the world around us has changed since we last updated this? So that's, part of the challenge that we're facing now is that because it's been so long since we've updated the plan, that it's so much change. What's being envisioned now is so much change from what was envisioned in 1970. That it's a shock to a lot of people. Whereas, cities that update their plans every 10 to 15 years, you see the gradual change over time. So it doesn't look like it's not a sudden change. It looks like, and then the fear is everything's going to happen overnight because it comes on gradually. So we're in a little bit different, challenging situation here just because it's been so long since we've updated it. But again, that doesn't mean that the change is going to happen overnight. The colors on the map on the paper will change overnight, but what you actually see out there won't.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Cusworth.
Are you the one that made all of those interactive maps for the survey, for the, presentation or what's on the website? I was pretty impressed with your interactive maps. Did you do that?
I personally didn't. Our consultant, I mean, we worked with them on making it usable and clickable and, let's see if it can do this and see if it can do that. But our consultant actually did the technical side and put it all together.
Okay.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear that they're useful. Thank you for the feedback.
And on that topic, Michael, are there tools on there with green markers so we can start marking more green on the map if we wanted to?
It only has the ability to put dots, but if you want to put a whole bunch of dots in the same spot and say park, 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 then go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Very helpful. And I know you're going to be doing this time and again and fielding lots of questions, but thank you for taking the time to spend your evening with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
You know where to find me when you want another update. Let us know and we're happy to come back anytime.
Thank you for the offer. We just may take you up on that.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Friedel, for making that arrangement. And for
Thank you on behalf right now.
Yeah.
One specific little thing and then.
Oh, just thanks for taking the time and keeping us in the forefront of what they're doing. And as well as our staff too. I know our staff is actively involved, so thank you for doing that. And continue typing away. I'm going to go on with item 9A, which is the teen center item. And I presume Mr. Hare is going to take this. Is that
Sure,
correct?
I'll give it a try.
Well, Mr. Friedel is busy over here.
I'll see if yeah, thanks to Chair Nichols and members of the board. As you well know, yeah, this is the second part of the grant agreements we're doing with the City of Thousand Oaks, expanding the teen center, renovating the teen center and renovating the Global Adult Community Center. This grant agreement was taken to the City Council last Tuesday and was approved there. I represent the Park District at that council meeting. Kind of the interesting thing about this is a little bit different in that, I mean, in a good way, that the intent was a $3 million grant and we underspent a little bit on the design portion of it. And so we're able to get the balance of the money that's left over from before to take it to this point and to continue on. So in the end, the bottom line is $3 million is the grant amount. And I want to bring up too, that because of COVID and stopping and starting and doing some other things, there was one paragraph that thank you. There was one paragraph that was not in the attachment that you have in your board packet. And it was just simply because there was a grant agreement regarding construction that was considered back in October of 2019. And the one paragraph that's not in there just talks about that this grant agreement supersedes that previous grant agreement. Jim's got the final copy, and I'm more than happy to read it out loud, what it should say, but it just simply says this grant agreement dated February 9th, 2021 supersedes, rescinds, and replaces the grant agreement dated October 22nd, 2019, city contract number, blah, 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 city grant agreement, blah, 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 is terminated by written consent of both parties. So it just sort of supersedes the other one. But of course, unfortunately, since it's section 1, all the other sections got renumbered as it went on that way. So Jim has a copy of that for, if you'd like, I'll take a look at it. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Okay, very good. That was going to be one of my questions was, did anything change? So that was the only change then. Okay. Let's see, I think I'm back to starting on this side again. Director Huffer?
Thank you. Tom, I seem to recall that this question was probably asked and answered a couple of years ago when we first started talking about this project. But how is the construction going to be timed or worked out to hopefully minimize the impact? I mean, it would have been really nice if we could have done this while everything was closed down. Obviously, we couldn't, but once the teen center gets up and running and Global Center gets up and running, how is this going to happen without totally shutting everything down for months?
Working very closely with the rec staff on what can and can't be done. Even pre-pandemic, we had those plans in place on when's the best time to do this portion of the work, the best time to do this portion of the work. So with both senior center staff and teen center staff, we kind of figured out what's the best schedule we could have, and whether we need to bring some temporary facilities for the restrooms while they're being renovated, and weather-wise, weather considerations that we have, because we have the majority of the work is outside work. So again, just working very closely with the center staff for both centers.
All right, thank you.
Director Holt, did you have any questions? No. Director Cusworth, do you have any questions?
No, this seems very straightforward, but I was wondering, did you say where exactly that new paragraph was supposed to go, on which page?
It would go, it'd be section 1, it'd be right, like if after all the whereases, it would go, and you have the first one says now therefore, and then it goes to number 1 grant amount.
Right.
Instead of be number 1, I forget what the exact title is, but it's just basically super. I don't know if there's even a title.
Okay, I was just wondering where it was.
It goes right before the grant amount.
Okay.
So Jim's got it right there. If you want.
Okay.
Just say right here, it says this agreement supersedes or replaces the other.
Okay. All righty. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to have a visual on that. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Thank
And it's interesting, just as a side note, because I did send a little thank you note, as Mr. Friedel suggested, to all of the city council members. And the 2 who wrote back to me were 2 that I had talked to previously by our little friendship things. And so I thought, well, that was interesting that they're the ones that wanted to respond. So I think our, buddy, program is a good idea. So.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. And Director Lang?
Yes, as it indicates on page 31, number 7, CRPD is the project coordinator and responsible for the actual work and so forth. So would that individual be Mr. Tom Hare, that people would say, hey, this doesn't look as good as we thought it was?
Well, the bad stuff, that's Andrew.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't take credit for this. No, Andrew will be the lead project manager on this. And yeah, of course I'll be, with all projects that we do, I oversee what Andrew's doing, and I pay very close attention to what's going on. But Andrew will be the point person for this, as he is with all our construction projects. And we'll work closely with in addition to, like we're answering Chuck's question, we work very closely with the recreation staff as far as scheduling and what they want. And also what Director Holt just kind of mentioned, we'll work very closely with the city staff because ultimately it's their money and their building. So we're not going to all of a sudden add a third story a second and third story to everything. So, but we'll work closely with them throughout the process.
And I thought the article in today's Acorn was very positive. And your comment about the teen center's work, the best backyard in the neighborhood, remind me of what you were saying about Dover and Hendricks and Caneo Community Center, the best house in the neighborhood. So
We got a lot of bests.
yeah. So good job, and thank you for representing the district very
Welcome.
positively in our community.
Yeah, it's good to see this come forward again. I know we put it in hiatus in anticipation of this returning, so it's good to see. And hopefully this will just fall right in sync with all the return to normalcy that we expect this year at some point, whenever that happens. As we're trying to do it in piecemeal fashion as we can. But appreciate the efforts to keep this going. And I too watched the city council meeting and also extended some appreciation. And what I found, 2 or 3 of them responded back to me saying, hey, anything that helps our community, especially the people who live here. So I thought that was a good kind of acknowledgement of our efforts, particularly in the Park District. We're so, I wouldn't say solely, but predominantly is to support our community. The city has a lot of different things that they're involved with, as far as managing the overall operations of this community. But when it comes to actually interacting with people, we're face to face with the people, and especially our staff and the, especially Rochelle's staff, make sure these things happen. So I think they acknowledge that and recognize that. So it was good to hear back from them. So, yes, Dr. Hubbard.
With the comments that both of you made about feedback from the city council, I did promise that I would pass along the vice mayor's comment. Councilmember Engler said, you're welcome, but to spend the money carefully, so.
Ooh. That's gonna be a challenge.
You gotta spend it, you gotta spend it, that's all.
Very good. Director Lang?
Yes, I'm ready to make a motion in support of the recommendation. Number 1, authorize the general manager to enter into a grant agreement with the city of Thousand Oaks for the teen center expansion and renovation of the Global Adult Community Center renovation. And 2, recognize grant revenue in the amount of $2,700,000 and appropriate to the Alex Fiore Teen Center expansion and renovation and Global Adult Community Center renovation project per the staff report.
And
Just point of order.
yes,
If I
Director Hubbard.
could, Director Lang, I believe recommendation 1 needs to be modified to include the additional language that Mr. Hare talked about.
Okay,
I think it does.
well, it's, okay.
Because I mean, anyway.
Well, whatever the,
It's the new paragraph 1
right,
Yeah.
okay.
regarding the superseding of the former.
So
agreement.
I'll modify my motion to include the change in the modified one.
Very good. I think the staff has that. Do we have a second to that motion? Director Cusworth. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. So we'll expect to be breaking ground here next week. Thank you, Mr. Hare. All right, next we have reports and reports and announcements. We have the investment report, budget report, fees, highlights, program enrollment, facility reservations, A through F. These are all for information. Were there any questions on any of these? Yes, Director Huffer.
Just a quick comment. I want to make sure that we thank Loretta for reducing this down to a single page. So saving lots of trees that way.
And,
Yes.
and as you know, the bulk of it is actually still in the online version. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to department reports, and item 11A is Parks Division report. Mr. Hare.
Thanks, Chair Nichols, members of the board. Just another wonderful opportunity with partnering with the City of Thousand Oaks, which will be coming up at our a couple board meetings from now after our awards meeting on March 4th. On March 18th, we're planning on the Rancho Potrero equestrian agreement with the city and all that entails. They're shooting for there's a COSCA special board meeting on March 10th. The city council, they're aiming for March 16th, and then we'll be batting cleanup and doing it on March 18th for the consideration of that item. And that's all I have. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hare? Okay, we'll move on to the Recreation Division report. Ms. Callis?
Thank you, Chair Nichols and members of the board. So I've got a small list. So we have our new supervisor of marketing and communications started this week. Her name is Charlene Morla Garcia, and she's had a couple days with us, and we're super excited to have her with us. And I am sure in the next month or so, she'll possibly reach out to you guys to maybe have a little phone conversation and just kind of talk to you about who you are and what you might like to see in marketing. She has a degree in art with an emphasis in graphic design, and she grew up in Oxnard and has worked for the Chamber, Oxnard College. So she has a lot of great experience and a lot of really good references. So we're excited to have her on board. The tax program has started, and Julie has been inundated with 400 plus phone calls on some days since they've started. The tax program, yeah, sorry, it's mask talking. But also I believe this is what she had told us, was that many of our neighboring cities are not doing the program this year that have done it in the past. And so all those cities are sending people our way. And we only have so many spots, and we are having to do it very differently, which I'm sure Chuck can tell you about later if you'd like, but it's a very different process even from last year. So just to try to keep everybody safe and stuff, but we're super grateful to all of our volunteers that are making it happen, because obviously there's a need with so many people calling. We had Valentine's grams that went out. We had a vehicle all decorated, and adults and kids got Valentine's grams on the Friday before Valentine's Day. The next event that is coming up, we usually have our flashlight egg hunt or egg extravaganza usually in April, which obviously we have to do differently again this year. So we have tweaked it, and there's going to be an event called You've Been Egged. So it's You've Been Egged. So it's basically you can sign the grandkids up, and you sign up, and I think it's gonna be like $20, but we will go out, put a sign in your yard, kind of like the flamingos when you've been flamingoed.
Oh, yeah.
We'll put a sign in your yard that you've been egged, and we will hide or put on the grass or the front yard area 20 eggs in a little basket at the front door, egged.
Eggs, like chicken lays eggs.
No, and like an Easter egg. And then the families will be able to come out, and you can actually pay a little bit extra, and you can get it done at night, and you'll be given a flashlight. So you have to go search for the eggs in the flashlight. So we're super excited about that and trying to just do it, in a different way. The spring guide should be coming out on the 24th. Registration starts March 8th. Staff have been busy working on their budgets for the upcoming year, which I know Melissa will be leading in a couple months with you guys. And they've also been really busy working on the summer program guide, trying to figure out what we can do this summer and how we're going to do it, and trying to plan for maybe we'll be in red and we can do more and all that good stuff. I did have one of our staff, Avery, came by the office yesterday, and he is starting a new program. So they're getting very creative. He is actually a certified archery instructor now for us. And he has invested in a archery tag program. So the arrows have like a padding on the end. They're not pointies. And you basically, it's like playing paintball, but with archery. So we're going to be starting some new stuff with that, which is really cool. It's neat to see our staff be so creative and come up with different things and get trainings on things and try to do things. I think that'll be a great birthday party thing that'll happen. And then just so you guys know, Safe Passage, specifically at 850 Warwick, is having some changes that are going on there with the apartment complex turning over and all that good stuff. So we're looking at what this looks like for the future and what's going to be happening. So there's some discussions and whatnot. We will continue to serve the families that need help with the programs. We've been doing it all year at Caneo Community Center because we haven't been able to use our room there, but it's going to zag and we're going to zag with it. So we'll see what that specific location looks like in the future. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? That report? Yes, Director Huffer?
Yeah, I can't remember one of your reports this was in, but one of the activities or classes that you had was wedding dancing. I just, is that teaching fathers of the bride how to dance at the
It
wedding?
might be, I actually don't know.
Because if that's what it was, I wish they'd had that 5 years ago, but.
Where'd you see that? Oh,
I've seen it in the
probably
program, in the
It's
program
probably
guide.
in the Dos
Yeah.
Vientos.
Yeah.
It's in Dos Vientos. Yeah, yeah. It might,
Yeah.
I'll have to find out.
I think maybe we could have a special presentation about dancing and that would cover it.
We cover quite a bit of dancing out
Yes.
there in the field, so
Maybe
all
some-
sorts.
Maybe some samples, sample dancing. Okay, very good. Thank you. Oh, yes, Director Lang.
Yes, in the your recreation report, this page of photos. Now, that says it's at the Global Adult Community Center. You're trying to convey what specific message here?
So the report that you have in your hand that you're looking at is an internal report that we do for the homeless. And it's basically, we have our staff track their encounters with the homeless population. And sometimes they are able to take pictures. And it's just so that we can know kind of what's going on out in our community centers and with our staff in regards to the homeless population. And we share that with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, coming from us live from some distant unknown location, the Management Services Division report with Melissa Smith. Thank you for being with us remotely this evening. Good to see you.
Good to see you all. Thank you, Chair and Directors. Sorry I'm not there in person, but I'll be back for the next one. I only have a tiny thing in your materials. I hope there is an updated budget calendar. We just pushed it back one budget meeting, everything, and the highlighted ones are the only dates that are changing. So that's my only item for you, and I'll be back next time, and I'm available for questions.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Smith? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for sticking with us. And next we have our General Manager's report, Mr. Friedel.
Yes, Chair Nichols, Director Lang brought to my attention a article, I guess a press release. I actually hadn't seen the press release, but I was on a call this morning where the police chief shared that Ventura County Sheriff's Thousand Oaks Police Department busted a very active Chilean gang that was doing a lot of burglaries in town, and we've had many vehicular break-ins at dog parks, at open space trailheads, that kind of thing. Golf courses are getting hit. We're getting hit really bad. Even the regional mall, any place somebody parks for a few hours at a time, there was just a tremendous amount of vehicular burglaries. So it was really great that they caught those guys. So that's really good news, breaking news. Eileen's not in here, but did you guys get this in your packet, the handout of the
Yes.
list of the folks? So,
Yes.
so without getting into the weeds too much, I just wanted to share with you the list of the folks we'll be recognizing at our next meeting. And so at our next meeting, we're going to be doing something we haven't done before. We're doing the awards in an exclusive awards night. Really, we're just making the next board meeting all about the employees and doing this kind of an awards night. And we're really kind of stealing or borrowing from the idea of the Academy Awards. we've got it figured out with this many people. It's 5 minutes a person, 15 minutes in little groups for the board to say some words. It's going to end up being about 2.5 hours, because when you go through all this, it takes some time. So we'll be giving you some additional sort of instructions or guidance as we get closer to the meeting 2 weeks from now, and how how we're going to do it. But because of the nature of COVID, it's going to be on Zoom for the most part. Everyone's going to be Zooming in. And so we're going to have this kind of scripted out for everybody and trying to keep it within a reasonable amount of time. The reason we got so backlogged is simply because we kept thinking, yeah, we'll put these folks off till the next time when COVID breaks and we can start meeting again. And after a year, we realized that we can't keep putting it off, and we do need to recognize our folks that have been doing such a great job. So we're going to just do everybody on one big awards night during the next meeting. So kind of wanted to prep you guys for that. And that'll be a fun meeting. Those are fun meetings, but that's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, that'll be virtual, except for the board will still be here?
Yeah, the board will be in here, but pretty much everyone else will be coming in on the TV. So Mark is going to have, this is going to test Mark's, the limits of his capabilities.
Yeah, John is a backup.
Pulling up the right people at the right time, and people will be coming in and out, and family members. So Mark's, beads of sweat. I can see him from here.
Somehow I don't think this is going to test Mark. This is just going to show us another facet of his talents.
Tom mentioned the Casca special meeting. Rochelle mentioned the safe passage. I do want to kind of be even a little more clear than Rochelle. She was being very, kind and whatnot, but we're pretty much going to be out of the building.
Oh.
So the new owners aren't really interested in having space dedicated to safe passage or youth group space. So that's okay, because like Rochelle said, the last year we have been doing the safe passage program out of Conejo Community Center and outdoors, because we haven't actually been in the room in there anyway. So for the kids who would be the ones that would be impacted, they're kind of not used to getting in that room of late anyway. So if it was going to happen, this is actually not
Good
the
time.
worst time. But that is
Would they still go to the park?
we
That's
hope
where
so, if they live within walking
You're not
distance
going
to
to have
the
the
park.
tutoring program any longer in the basement there, right?
No, so that's going to have
It's
to,
walkable.
if you live at 850 Warwick.
Yeah.
Yes, Director Lang.
Yeah, how about any interaction with parents? There probably have been, because I know one time there were. Would those opportunities still be there? Because I think that's a positive communication to the parents from the park district.
Yeah, and all the kids that are attending our program at Conejo Community Center, our staff see the parents. They still have to pick up the kids or walk there to get the kids. Until we can gather, we can't really do, the backpack thing and the lunch thing and the dinner thing. We're trying to come up with an idea to do maybe a takeout lunch thing so we can see the parents during this transition and make
Right.
sure that they have resources available to them. That was Jim's idea. So we're going to try to make that happen.
Perfect.
But, I think like Jim is saying and he's saying it very nicely. This is, as long as the people are still living at 850 Warwick, we can serve them. As things change there, families might get dispersed and have to go other places. And so we just don't know what the population's going to be. So it'll depend on what the need is, but we can still partner with Acacia School, and there's a couple of other apartment complexes that are right near 850 Warwick that a lot of our families have moved from 850 into other apartment complexes. So we hopefully will be able to continue to serve the population.
Great.
And again, 850 is just half of it, or not even half. The bulk of it actually occurs in Newbury Park at the Creek condos. So that, so this is just a satellite location that Kiwanis has painted and Rotary's done work. And it's a place that communities invest a lot of energy into. So yeah, it didn't sit well. So go through your 5 stages of loss, Chuck. And yeah, so no, it took me a couple days to accept the reality of that. but that is what's going to be happening.
Sounds like another pivoting.
Yes, pivoting yet again, correct. And then on the homeless, I did share, or Rochelle shared the work that her staff does with the full board and it's something we've been doing now for a few years because the city has wanted to kind of be abreast of what we are experiencing at the centers. So this doesn't really reflect what is happening at all the parks or in the open space. You know, there are challenges with the number of homeless that are out there, and we do now work in that world and with that population in a pretty regular basis. So it's not shocking or jarring or anything. This is what is life for us now. How it's become not just here, but you know, far worse in other places really close by. So we feel like in the context of the regional area, we're doing pretty darn well, but it is a change and a challenge that staff has, you know, had to kind of work with more and more over the past few years. So no doubt there's a greater challenge. I don't want to say anything further because Director, if you remember a couple meetings ago, maybe 3 meetings ago, Director Cussworth asked for an item on subsequent agenda to provide an update on some research with homelessness. And she has done a ton of work. I've only been a piece of all the work she's done. So she actually will be the one doing the report under 12. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any questions for the general manager? Okay, we'll move on to director's reports. Director Lang, do you have any information to report to the board?
I don't. And I think this is probably the first time in my history.
Let's mark this date in the calendar. Okay. Director Cussworth.
Well, I wish I had a video to show you, but maybe it's just better that I don't. And I'll send it all to you, but it was very interesting to me. They took out a tree at the Stagecoach Inn. It was a historic tree because it was dedicated to Guy Runyon, who had been the News Chronicle editor. I'm assuming that they might dedicate the new tree, but anyway, Rec and Park had tried to save the tree, but they couldn't. And then they brought another tree a long time ago to replace it. Anyway, I guess with COVID and then all the different things that have happened, they finally took down the tree and then they put in the new tree. And it was Treescapes that did it, which is one of the companies that we just said we were going to be working with. And I was there when they were putting in the new tree. I wasn't there when they took down the old one. So I took a video of their teamwork of getting this tree in. It's really quite impressive. And so I was going to have Mark put it up, but my phone wouldn't let me send it because I'm not connected to the internet here. And I didn't want to run over and start talking to him more during the other presentation. So I'll just email it to all of you. But they had incredible teamwork, and it's just interesting to see how they would put in this new tree. And I do want to say one thing though, because they're trying to do it and they had a skip loader and they're pulling it and it's heavy and they can't get it. And I turned to one of the other people and I said, well, they need to do like what they did with Stonehenge to get some logs under there. 5 minutes later, they're putting logs under. And I thought, well, I wish I had told them that so I could take credit for it. So then they were doing some stuff and then they were trying to get up the hill and I go, they need to put like some plywood under that. And then it was like a couple of minutes later, I see they got some plywood under that. So I don't know, maybe it was some energy, but I thought it was interesting that I had the idea and they were doing it. And then at the end, they had the whole crew pushing this tree up a hill. Anyway, it was kind of interesting. And I thought it was kind of cool because it was Treescapes that did it that we are, working with. So other than that, I talked to a couple of my buddies or talked to one of my buddies and that went well, but went to another meeting at the Stagecoach Inn. But other than that, no, I think I'm kind of with Director Lang. It hasn't been that busy of 2 weeks.
Thank you. Director Holt.
Well, I was starting to do the meeting with the city council person and what do you call it? The school board. The school board, we had something set up. I had something set up with him, but now he wants to wait until he gets the shot. And so we postponed that. But I met with, good, they sit here too long. Claudia de la Peña. And I mean, we met for a couple hours and we discussed a lot of things, for instance, on this whole housing thing. And she took a lot of flack after the city council meeting because she ultimately voted with to go ahead with the plans. But she said that's only the plans. She's not convinced. And this is maybe not for publication necessarily, but I know that's okay. I mean, she's probably said this because she did take so much flack for doing that, because there are people on this side and people on that side on this issue. And, but it's kind of a wait and see, the start of it. And I mean, we had a really good discussion. As I said, it was 2 hours. And it was definitely worthwhile. It gave me a different perspective on things going on at the city. And so that's a great program, I think. So basically, that's the extra thing I might have done.
Very good. Thank you. Director Huffer.
Yeah, just two things briefly. I have had a chance to, of course, I meet with him informally regularly, but did meet with Councilmember Engler. I have not had a chance yet to schedule a meeting with my school board person, but I will do that. Rochelle mentioned the tax program, and what the staff at the Global Center has gone through in the last month is just absolutely incredible. A year ago at this time, when the tax program was just getting started, it was real simple. The Global had a little bit of work to do, but not all that much. The tax clients would come over to the Canal Creek South building, wait in the line, we'd do their taxes. 2 hours later, they'd walk out with a complete tax return. It was real simple. Now the clients get scheduled by the Global staff in between calls that they get from the people looking for vaccination, particularly early on when the county wasn't answering their phone lines. So everybody was calling the Global Center to find out what needed to be done. So anyway, they had to call the Global Center. 300 or 400 people have messages that they're trying to get back to. They get people calling back 5, 10, 15 times, wondering why they haven't got a call back. So their queue keeps getting longer and longer of people who are same person calling multiple times. So they have to schedule the appointment. Little contact for the clients. They come in, have all of their forms scanned, and then they walk away. The forms get sent electronically to a preparer, gets back to a coordinator, goes to a reviewer, back to a coordinator, gets printed out, the client comes in, talks remotely. In the whole process, we hope it'll take less than a week per return, as opposed to the old days when it was just a couple hours and got the tax return done.
Wow.
But kudos to the people at the Global Center, because they are just being run ragged between the tax program, and even though the county is running the vaccination clinic, they've taken over a good portion of the Global, and definitely keeping everybody hopping over there. So please thank them for me for what they do.
Thank you. And then the only thing that I had to report as far as activities that actually Director Huffer and I both had a Costco board meeting on February 10th. It was Zoom. We probably got lost in all the Zoom shuffle of meetings that we all do. But that was the only other activity that I had to report. Okay, next is item 12, requests for status reports and items for subsequent agendas. And I do believe we have something from Director Cussworth.
So yes, I just took down a few notes. As I said, I was concerned about the homeless situation in Thousand Oaks. And as we mentioned, it's a lot less, it's not as bad here as it is in other cities. However, it has gotten a lot worse here. So I was wanting to know more of what's going on, basically. So I talked with Claudia Bill de la Peña and Bob Engler, because they're on the city council and they're part of the ad hoc committee on homeless. Jim and I both talked with Ingrid Hardy, who's the assistant city manager, and she works on that committee. We talked with the police, Juan and Josh, who are dedicated just to homeless. Jim was also with me on that. I talked to Tara Caruth, who writes grants and manages money for the Continuum of Care, which is run out of Ventura. And I also talked with Denise Cortez, who is the founder and runs Harbor House. I also watched a video, which is if you just go to City of Thousand Oaks Homeless YouTube. It's a nice video. It was probably done a couple of years ago. And because Tim Hagel is still the police chief at that time. But it's very similar to what's going on now. It's 14 minutes. And so you could watch that on your own. And I also watched another video of a homeless program that they did in Salt Lake City, which they had excellent results from, but then found that if they didn't keep up with the huge influx of money, that it was kind of falling apart. And they were having some of the same problems that we do. And I thought it'd be interesting there because it's cold there. So you think people would be very, very interested in getting into housing, but that's not always the case. So depending on who I talk to, we have about 160 to 320 homeless people in here. And the people that were saying that we had the most were the ones that were directly dealing with the homeless people. So I think they have a pretty good idea. And the 320 figure is probably including people in their cars or their motorhomes or different places. So I found out that a lot of the increase is coming from people who are out of town. We're getting a lot of out of towners come in, and COVID-19 might have affected some of that and also affected some people becoming homeless. A lot of people can become homeless just because they're losing their jobs or their income. But usually if that's the case, through a lot of the community services, they can get help. They can get, help with rent, help with different things. It's when people end up on the street. And in fact, the police officer said if they're on the street for a couple of months, that's when it gets really hard to help them. So there are a lot of services that are set in place that probably a lot of you know of, but I'll just talk briefly about them. I thought it was interesting when I was talking to some people. They said the people that are out of town, they'll give them food, but they won't give them, services, because if it starts getting out there in the homeless community, like, hey, you can get, rent, you can get into hotels, you can get all this stuff, you can go to Conejo Valley. So they don't want to turn anybody away for food, but they aren't helping, and they do look at ID to find out. In fact, I thought it interesting because when I was talking to Denise Cortez at Harbor House, she says if they see that somebody is from out of town, she will pay for their bus ticket to go home. And she's also had people who have come here for different reasons, that they're homeless. They were homeless where they were. They came here and they say, well, no, we want to relocate here. And I go, so you have homeless people relocating to Conejo Valley? She goes, yeah, it's really nice here. So that is somewhat of a problem that is causing the increase. A lot of you know some of the services we have. We have many mansions, but that is filled. They won't take any applications anymore, and that's to give people low-cost housing or subsidized housing. In fact, many mansions says don't even make out an application. We have a 10-year waiting list. So that's not getting people into housing very fast. In fact, when I talked with Tara Caruth, she was saying our main problem is lack of shelter. And so it's hard to get people into places. The continuum of care, that's what Tara Caruth over in Ventura County is working on. And that is to, again, get grants to places like Many Mansions, Manna, Harbor House, that they can get direct care to people and help to people. We have our police officers, as I mentioned, and Harbor House also keeps everything local. Denise Cortez used to be the supervisor for Lutheran Social Services, but she said a lot of the money was going out of the county, so she started Harbor House. So any money that comes into Conejo Valley stays in Conejo Valley, and they can help our local residents here. Under one roof with the Community Conscience there on Hillcrest is also a very good source. They even have dentists there, they have behavior, therapists, counselors, lots of different people that can help people. Of course, you have to have people wanting to come. And that's somewhat of an issue they have. So again, if you're wanting help, that's the first step, is that they can hopefully get help to you, but there is a lack of shelter. Now, we do have our winter shelter, which only goes in the winter time. And when I've asked, why do we just have that in the winter? Why can't we have that year round? They're saying lack of resources, but that might be something they'll think of, because if you don't have the winter shelter, then you've got people sleeping outside again, and then they start making kind of encampments and things like we're seeing in this report. And they're hanging around in parks because it's public property. They're not going to go and hang out on somebody's front doorstep. So they're going to go in places like parks and open space and try to get something there. Also probably looking for a place that has some water, like maybe some electricity possibly. I don't know if they have things that they want to have charged, or I don't know, you know, something that they can plug in, and restrooms. One of the problems with not having any shelter is that everybody has to sleep and everybody has to use the restroom. So if there's not a place to go, then they're going to sleep somewhere, and they're going to have to, you know, be depositing waste someplace. And also for some reason, homeless people tend to leave a lot of trash in encampments. Now, part of the problem with the encampments that we've had is that we're not allowed to move them because of COVID. Because previously, if somebody had reported an encampment, the police officer would go in and say, we're going to clean this all up in a few days, you've got to move on. So you wouldn't have the kind of encampments that we were seeing on the 23 freeway. So that can probably help, but then the police officers say they're just moving from one place to another. Being homeless is not a crime. So they can't arrest somebody for being homeless. They wouldn't send somebody to jail for being homeless. The only time they can do it is if they are breaking the law, being disruptive, or being a problem to themselves or others. One of the problems that they have right now is that the jails are overcrowded, and potentially because of COVID, they don't want as many people, but they're just overcrowded. They have felons out on the street, so they're certainly not going to take a homeless person into a prison or even a jail. So the homeless people know that if they say we're going to take you to jail, they know they'll be out within a few hours or overnight at the most. So it's not any kind of a threat to say, if you don't get into Alcoholics Anonymous, if you don't get into drugs, if Anonymous, if you don't get with a counselor, we're going to have to take you to prison because of your actions. Like, go ahead. They know that that's not any kind of a threat to them at all. There is a new task force for the East Valley. Before, all of the energy in Ventura County was going to the West Valley. That's where most of the homeless people were. And I know my husband and I went to dinner in Ventura the other day, and yes, in the parks. There are people living in the parks there, and I'm sure we've all been there and we've seen that before. Though it sounds like at our community centers, we have that here also. But now they're seeing that the problem is getting bad enough here that they have at least are having some sort of a task force where the county is going to maybe get a little bit involved in helping out. They do have a Ventura County Behavioral Health Center, and that has a lot of services that we don't have here. And our police officers will drive anyone who agrees to appointments and things at that center in Ventura in order to help them out. Our police officers are amazing. They're working as police officers and law enforcement. They're also working as social workers and compassionate people. And they have excellent communication with the Rec and Park. In fact, when we were talking to them, he's getting calls. And I don't know what their schedule is, because it sounded like they were working all day and all night. I mean, so they must be taking some sort of breaks during the day. But his radio was going a few times to talk to people. So what are some of the solutions that I talked to all of these people with? Now, my first thought was, why don't we have a shelter here with beds? So that if somebody is sleeping out, they say, okay, you cannot sleep here. We're taking you to a shelter. Here's a bed. That's where you're going to go. One of the problems with a shelter is the extreme cost and also where to put it. So a shelter can be very good. But what the city would have to do is they would have to find a place, which that's hard enough, buy it, retrofit it, and then they have to hire somebody to run it like Mercy House, which does a good job. And maybe in the future, that might be something that we would do. Another thing that I had thought of is a parking lot. I had heard for people that are in cars, what about having a designated parking lot that people can go to? They know they're safe. Police could monitor it. There could be bathrooms there, you know, Andy Gums, you have some sanitation. The problem that they have, one, is nobody is volunteering a parking lot. And two, they found if you get large groups of homeless people together, it starts to become kind of a community with the heads and not wanting other people in, and you get too much of a social problem going with that, because that's been looked into, even having a lot of people just staying at the churches overnight in the cars. Some of that has caused some problems. That was another thing that I mentioned to one of the people of our winter shelter. All of the churches are so far apart. It's hard for homeless people to walk to all of them if they don't have a vehicle, which is a constant thing that they do complain about. However, they're afraid that if they just have it at one church, again, we're going to have neighbors are going to be complaining, because then people are just going to hang around there all day in a neighborhood. And so again, there's a lot of not in my backyard, which is understandable if we thought of it in our backyard. So, you know, that is understandable. So that is one reason that the churches are so far apart. And they've talked to the bus systems to see if they could keep them running longer so that they could get to the different areas. But again, that's been a problem. The one thing that most people seem to agree on is that motel rooms are the best. And the city has tried to buy a home motel area, but the escrow fell through. So they would have to find another, you know, hotel that is willing to sell to the city for homeless people. However, they do give vouchers to hotels to homeless people to stay at a couple of the motels that are here. Interestingly, giving people money for rent and hotel rooms is actually cheaper than a shelter. And I had a couple of the people that I talked to tell me that, you know, people that would know. One person said what they like about the motel rooms is it keeps people off the street. They're not on the street all day. They have a place, and it's easier for them to go and give services to the people because they know where they are. One of the problems with any of this is that a lot of the population of the people who are homeless, because a lot of people are not homeless on the street. They're homeless, but they're not on the street because of these services. So we would have a lot more if we didn't have these services. But one of the problems is a lot of the people who are on the street have mental illness, alcohol, and drug abuse, which we all know. It's said that if somebody gets on the street, I might have told you, it's about 2 months. If they can get them into some sort of shelter within 2 months, there is more of a chance of helping them. Otherwise, after about 2 months, they kind of tend to get into a new routine and a new life. And the longer they're on the streets, the worse they become. So that's a problem. One of the new things that they're working on that I think is really very innovative is they have found that a huge percentage of homeless people were in foster care. And I wish I had written down the exact percentage, but I'm wanting to say 40%, but I think that might be too much. So, you know, don't quote me on that. But it was a large percentage are in foster care, because I guess what can happen is you're 18 years old, okay, you're out of foster care, goodbye. So the city has bought a house where they are now transitioning foster kids so that they have some support to get them into jobs and careers and going to school, getting them grants and different things to give them a heads up so they don't become homeless. Because it's very common. And so that's a way to do it. Another thing is I remember Channel Islands University used to be a complete mental health place. Right. And we used to have more mental health facilities, and because of budget constraints, those have, you know, closed. So nobody said this to me, completely my opinion, maybe that's part of the problem. Jail, prisons, they're not really set up to be mental health facilities. And maybe that's something that the state's going to have to look into, that they're going to have to do something more with that. Because again, if you read this report, a lot of the people who have been on the street for a long time are not real workable. They can become very violent and very agitated. Another issue that I want to really emphasize that everybody said to me is the biggest problem that will contribute to homelessness is giving money to panhandlers. Absolutely. And interestingly, one woman I talked to said, what are they going to do with that $60? What are they going to get a house? Are they going to get a job? People just do that so to help their conscience, but that keeps them on the street. She said some people make so much money. And one of the police officers even said he's had homeless people pull $300 and $400 out of their pockets that they'll get from panhandlers. She said people can make over $100 a day panhandling. And one fellow said that she wanted him to, go back to his city. And he says, well, I need to get my bike fixed. She said, I will pay to have your bike fixed, but you need to leave. And so he said, okay, thank you. Got the bike fixed. And then they see him out there again. And she says, why didn't you leave? And he says, I make too much money here. I can't leave. So that is the biggest message that I got from everybody is give money to Harbor House, give money to places that can help them. And, or else you're just enabling people. And a lot of these people have problems and they need help, but they won't get help if they're getting the money from being panhandlers. So where do we come in? Both the police and Harbor House remarked to me at how well they work with CRPD, and that the people working at our centers are very comfortable calling the police, and they're very comfortable calling Harbor House for help, and they try to get there immediately and have been very supportive to our centers. There's only so much you can do. I asked, how can we help you? And to Harbor House specifically, and she said, that's a good question. And she goes, I'm going to get back to you on that. So maybe there are things that we haven't thought about that we can help them, because as I was talking to one person, she goes, oh yeah, this homeless is really affecting you. And I said, well, that's why I'm calling, because in the end, it comes down to people being in our parks and in the open space. And we would like to hopefully help these people and help them get into a better position so they're not in the parks and in the open space. So that is my report.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. You obviously spent a lot of time and effort in that, and I can sense your passion as well. Appreciate that. I know I've had a number of experiences with helping in churches, being a guest chef at a shelter, all those things, and actually know one of the homeless here that we've interacted with for probably 20 years, and it's a chosen lifestyle. It really is for some people. So it's a bit of a challenge, but thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Oh, yes, Director Lane.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on Director Cusworth's comment about Camarillo State Hospital. Years ago in the 60s and 70s, involved with a volunteer group at church that would go out once a month to Camarillo State Hospital and visit with people, in a big room, then would entertain them and this and that. And when, I can't recall the governor now who eliminated that program, our group was so disappointed in the fact that, there's a need for these hospitals. And their alternative was on the street or in jail, and we just couldn't understand the basis of that decision. It was a financial, I think, decision, but yeah, I agree with you. I think there needs to be a resurgence of dedicated healthcare, mental health care centers. And anyway, but good work. As I think I recall mentioning when you first brought this topic up, I mentioned, because not knowing if you even knew, that our community centers have already for many years been addressing this issue and having to confront homeless people in the parks, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not to the same degree. So I just, knew that the park district was doing as much as we could. And I think that the unfortunate situation that we're seeing today and in some of these photos, that people are taking advantage of the park district and are by living in our parks and so forth. It's a unfortunate situation, but
Yeah, well, I was just sort of curious on like who was involved, and I knew a lot of these things already, and I know a lot of you did too. But, at the forefront of what they are trying to do, who the people are that are working on this, and what the, long-term plans are. So,
I've got one more question of Director Cusworth about Ingrid Hardy. Now, Jim would probably know this, was this an assignment for Assistant City Manager before she came here, or was this something that she just decided this is an important enough issue to look into?
No, she was assigned as a staff person to be kind of the homeless liaison to the council's ad hoc committee. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was in the city manager's office. The council created an ad hoc committee. She was the staff person assigned to the committee.
Okay, so I guess, is this a new program assignment that she took on? They just
I don't know how long she's been doing it.
Committee about a year and a half ago.
It was, yeah, maybe
Thank
even
you.
longer. It might have been,
I think it's been about 3 years
yeah,
ago.
3 years ago. Yeah, it's been about 3 years. Yeah. So like 3 years ago, as the problem has been getting worse, it got to the point where the council said, we need a committee to start looking at this. And she became the staff person assigned to that
Gotcha.
committee. So I don't know that she had any expertise or any specific subject matter knowledge before that. She was a park and rec person actually in Santa
Right,
Clarita,
right.
so in Oxnard. So
She was out of Santa Clarita, and it's just,
All right, Mr. Segedy, do we have any folks in the public wishing to address the board? We don't, and we do not have an executive closed session, so we are adjourning to March 4th, is that correct?
correct, for
Yes.
the Academy Awards.
For our Academy Awards of the Canal Rec and Park District. So thank you and good night.